Hello, Paul. Welcome to St Mary's. It's lovely to have you here. Paul is our new Citizens UK organiser. We're really thrilled that you are the organiser for Waltham Forest. We feel really delighted about that. Some people, Paul, have joined St Mary's quite recently or don't know much about community organising or citizens. How would you describe it to them? What would you say if someone asked you about it?
What I say? Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm loving being a part of Waltham Forest and the great work and great people that are involved in making this alliance, and meeting lots of people from St Mary's that have had an experience of community organising. I think really what's most important is that community organising is meeting people where they're at. Meeting people in their real situations, in their real life, in their real story, and sometimes challenge, and working to see actually how can we work with people's story to make change. And it's not really something that you can read a couple of pages and suddenly feel clued up about it. It's like how do you take the real things that you either go to bed worrying about, caring about, wake up worrying about, caring about? How do you take those things from just worry to things that actually you can take action on? And the best thing about organising is not just thinking about taking action, it's about thinking, who can I take action with?
Yes.
And what is the benefit of taking action with different people and others at the same time? You know, even if we don't win, even if we don't quite get those things that we want changed, if we do it with others, what we do is we build those lasting relationships. That sometimes is more important than the issues. We're always going to have issues. And community organising is about building fabric of people in relationship.
Yeah, oh, that's a really nice way of describing it. I've not heard anyone use that sentence, but I think it's so true. You're trying to sort of deepen the web of relationships that we live amongst, and believing that you know, this Sunday we're celebrating Trinity Sunday, and we're thinking about, you know, the relationship of God within God's own character, and so there's something there. I think that organising speaks into that. I mean, I think you've probably had one of the sort of longest, like lifelong experiences of organising in a way. I've not met many people who encountered it when you encountered it, and how it's had such an impact. Tell people your story. How did you get involved? And how do you end up being an organiser?
It's really interesting, and like commenting on what you're saying about the Trinity, I find it really important that it kind of speaks to organising teaching, which says that actually organising is not about finding leaders that are going to lead people and finding followers that are going to follow leaders. It's actually to say that actually the relationship between followers and leaders is one that is fluid. I could be a leader today and a follower tomorrow. In St Mary's, who are the people that are leading today around a particular issue that really means something to them? That's something that's worried them and angered them, but tomorrow may be the people that are following others that are leading. So, you know, with thinking about that kind of fluid relationship of the society, it really reminds me of like sometimes the different, you know, the facets of God. But for me, my story, and I'll try and be quick, and Vanessa, please cut me off when I'm going on too long.
Story. I love it. I don't want you to be quick. I love
it. Well, yeah, I guess interestingly, my story starts in school. It starts in school. It starts in church. I was brought up Roman Catholic. Got a very, very Catholic mother that took me to church every Sunday, and so I went to a Roman Catholic school in Forest Gate, not so far from St Mary's, maybe 15 minutes away. It's St Bonaventure's school, and it, you know, I was talking about this yesterday actually, and I've just written a piece on it about you know, the main mission of school the main mission of school really complemented with the kind of West African, first generation ideals, which was the way to settle yourself, the way to build foundation, the way to be powerful as people is to get education, get a great job, earn lots of money, and that will create this economic foundation from which you can start to do more. And so my school and a lot of schools, they tap into that. Actually, how can we help those young people achieve? And that was the kind of ideas I went into school. I wanted to be a lawyer. My mum wanted me to be a lawyer. In school, they said you could be a lawyer. That it's like, do these subjects. We're going to get you to this university, etc., etc., etc. But I realized when I was about 14, 15, that my school also taught another thing. It taught another power that they thought was a big part of their role, which was to teach young, especially black men, because it was a black majority school really, that actually they had power in their democratic rights. In this democratic society we live in, that it doesn't matter whether you were a young black man of 50 or 16, you could actually have power now. And even though we didn't have the vote, they taught us actually through the ideas of organizing really, that as young black men, if we listen to each other, if we speak our stories, if we start thinking about what we want to change, we can take action and we could win. And so I remember when this first really hit me when I was 15. There was a stabbing at my school. People might remember in 2006, 2007, and we had that year of that spate of stabbings, and London, the Evening Standard was like putting pictures of the new young person that had been stabbed to death, and we as a school was really kind of mourning this young man that had been killed in between three schools, actually: a primary school, St. Anthony's Primary School, St. Angela's Girls' School, and St. Bonaventure's. And we had the church, the Roman Catholic Church, in the middle, really. And they kind of instigated this vigil. And, it's the kind of thing that you would do, a vigil. Parents can come, teachers can come, students can come, light a candle, we walked around the area. But that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for those that were angry, that were scared, that were frustrated. It wasn't enough for me as a young person that was thinking, gosh, this is my area, this is my community, and it's unsafe. And I've got two younger brothers as well. So I was lucky really that I wasn't just in a school that just thought about education and told me to focus and think about your GCSEs. They said, actually, if you're angry, let's do something about it. And my director of sixth form at the time, I was planning to go sixth form at St. Bonaventure's, said that I should go to this meeting at church. And so I did, and I was familiar. It was my church. I'd never really come to church outside of being dragged on a Sunday by my mum. And we were in the vestry, and it was my priest, Father John Armitage, Monsignor John Armitage. It was maybe two elderly ladies, and this weird community organizer, they said they was in the corner, and me, and we sat and we spoke about what had happened in the area. We spoke about the vigil. We spoke about the elderly ladies that couldn't come out of their houses at 6 p.m. And I spoke about being scared to go to school in the morning, and would now walk with my brothers to school and wait for them after school and go home together. And we kind of had this sharing of this kind of mutual story, this common story of not wanting the violence in our community, being scared, but wanting action, really, wanting change. And I personally had this outpouring. I spoke about my housing issues as well in there, threw a bit of that in there. Talked about the frustrations of like my mum not being able to afford a laptop for me at school, and you know, threw everything out there. I'd never really been asked, never really had the opportunity as a young person to share my story about my challenges and the things I wanted to change. But I did at that point, and I was ready to leave. And just as I was ready to leave, Father John Armitage and the community organizer kind of stopped and said, no, we're going to meet again, because we actually want to be part of making these things happen.
Yeah.
And so, Paul, we really need you. I will never forget this really important words. We really need you between now and the next meeting to try and bring some other young people that are angry like yourself.
Yeah.
And it was the idea that, you know, my priest that I never really spoke to, you know, gave these great homilies, you know, his 50 odd, asking me as a 15-year-old to kind of take action with him, and that it was much needed.
Yeah.
And so that was just hugely empowering, right? That actually there was power through story. There's power through the relationships I did have. And I went away and I did it. I went away and I talked to young people, and, you know, some people, it was great talking to them because it informed the other views that were out there. But then there was other young people that were like, okay, I'll come.
Yeah.
And I came to the next meeting, and I remember we did a rounds, and Father John Armitage and Matthew Bolton, the organizer, said, you know, well done, Paul, for bringing 3 young people. And everybody kind of clapped, and they had this kind of moment of recognition.
Yeah.
Which was really, really important for me.
Yeah.
You know, the only recognition you normally get as a young person is the grades that you get back on your coursework or the exams you did. But this was about people you knew and had seen in your community that you'd never really worked with or done anything with, recognizing you for the contribution you've made, for what they're interested in and what you're interested in. And it was just a really powerful moment of you know, politics of a small p. It was politics. It was people coming together around issues and looking to see how we provide for each other and create solutions for each other. But it was like this kind of like people politics. It was community politics, as it were. And I guess I went from there really to launching all the way in to carry on organizing with this group. And we then tried to go out to the mosque and the Muslim school that was across the way, and, you know, first interactions with that kind of diverse demographic really. You know, I had Muslim neighbors. Of course, I lived in East London, and it was very normal for me to have seen a Muslim man or spoke to a Muslim neighbor. But to go into the school and say, is this issues that you're you know, worried about? Is this something that you want to act on? And speaking to Muslim boys that were also scared about going to school and had parents that were dropping them off right outside school because they were worried, and getting them involved in what we were doing. And suddenly we were, you know, linking up with a number of schools from Forest Gate, and, you know, we had people of all kind of demographics in that team. And we had a plan. We had a plan of what we wanted. We didn't just want that vigil. We wanted action. We wanted more police during school time. We wanted funding for projects for young people after school to do enrichment. And we had specific asks. And, you know, I was getting excited as a young person, and I was there going back into my school, talking about what this group was doing, ready for this massive action that we did, which was basically like a march. We marched from Forest Gate all the way down to East Ham Town Hall, which is where the tyrant, which is Sir Robin Wells, resided, who is now no longer the mayor of Newham.
He was the mayor for ages, wasn't he? Ages and ages. Just
28 years, I think, basically all my life. He's been a mayor there. He probably is still the mayor in some form somehow. But he basically didn't know what was happening. You know, we had this march, and all these different communities were joining that we had been engaging with as part of this team, and it was all planned. Joining building in numbers until we were outside the town hall, 150 people, many of which young people, with the banners, with our T-shirts, with an ask, with a narrative. We all had a certain narrative. It wasn't a protest. We knew exactly what we wanted from Sir Robin Wales.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a protest on the council, it was a protest on Sir Robin Wales. We wanted him to recognise that there was gang issues, violence issues on the streets of his borough.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to go in as a small little delegation with 3 young black men. I always forget the third, but I'll never forget the first, which was Paul Amuzie, who was the same age as me, but went on to be like the first black man to go through Catholic church training
Really?
in the UK in like 70 years or something ridiculous like that. But yeah, we went in together and we confronted Sir Robin Wales and made our ask to him. And he basically was like, "Who are you?" And I remember saying, "We're Telco, we're the East London Communities Organisation." And I said I was from St. Bonaventures, Paul Amuzie was from Rokeby School. And we said there's 150 people outside from 30 other organisations in Newham. And the power of being able to say that was like quite transformative for my journey at that time, really, of what people politics meant and the power that each individual has. You don't just need to educate yourself and get a good job and build a family for yourself and create that foundation. That actually there was a certain power you had through your democratic rights. There's a certain power you had from the institutions and relationships that you have built in your community. And when you recognize that, when you step into that, what more can be done together. And we left there. He never recognized us. He never said you're Telco, but what he did say is that he'll do the police thing. And so we won that. And that was amazing for me to just see as a 15-year-old that shared a story in a room of 4 people to a place where I could go back to school and say, the police that are here because we organised. I guess I was infatuated by that, and speeding through the story, I guess I carried on getting involved in more stuff. I got involved in the Olympic journey and the kind of deal that we set with Lord Coe for East London, some affordable housing and safer streets and living wage Olympic jobs. And I was involved with that whole process and started to learn a little bit more about the reach of this. As I was getting older and understanding the world a bit more and the country a bit more, I was thinking, wow, this is something that we should all be doing. This wasn't just for East London, and it wasn't just for young, disadvantaged black boys. It was for the young Muslim man, young Muslim mum, the all mums, teachers, the middle class. It was for people that cared about winning, people that cared about actually making real change. You should do it this way because it's fun. You get to do it with your people, people you want to know, people that you should be getting to know. And it was really great being recognized and winning. And it was really rubbish to keep losing. And this was an effective way of winning. So I went to university and had all the different conversations that I'm sure we've all had that have gone university, which is like, oh, I think the world should be like this, and I'm going to join the Labour Party, I'm joining the Lib Dems or whatever. And I said to them, no, well, that's great, you do that, but actually there's a certain politics that anybody can get involved in, and it doesn't matter who you affiliate to. It's all about working together around the issues in common, and winning. So I came out of university, and luckily I was offered a job in Brent. And I guess the reason why I still organise Vanessa is because since taking that journey from being someone in kind of experience organising without really knowing what I was doing, to being someone that's trying to help create experiences where people understand organising and experience organising so that they can do it, is that there is so many powerful journeys for people. and it's way beyond mine as a young black man. It's journeys of people that are 40, 50, 60, journeys of people that are really comfortable, journeys of people that are really not comfortable.
Yeah.
And for everybody, when they organize, there's a steep learning curve about power, about working with organizations, about understanding their own story and interests, and very much so what it's like to win, and to win a lot.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I've noticed, and I admire in you, is the way you would, without thinking, go into like an organization, a school or something, and just say, hi, I'm here to like connect and see if there are issues. Whereas I'd be like quite shy or nervous about that. But I think when you do it, I just see this, I suppose what I see in you is a knowledge that actually, unless you take those first steps, nothing happens, that so much can be achieved by building those relationships, and that there's a real sort of joy in that kind of choosing to make connection. That's what I kind of really see, and I can see now that comes from, from when you were 15, you were given the tools and the the real kind of confidence to go in and say there's an important conversation to be had, and I think that's something I'd love for us to learn through organising, is to know the joy and the power and the necessity of having these conversations to work together for change, and to say you have power to walk into the office of the leader of your council. You don't have to die. So thanks for showing me that, especially initially. I've learned something from you in that, and that there's a real joy in it. I suppose
and it was a journey, Vanessa.
Yeah.
It was a journey as well, just to remember that nobody has to walk into the council, the leader of the council office straight away. And actually, it started where we were at. It started where we were familiar. It started in the culture of my church and school that I already had relationships in, I already felt comfortable in. And it was first digging deeper into that and building from there. And then from there to start getting the confidence that actually, if I've got my whole church with me, of course I can go to another church. Of course I can go to St. Gabriel's or the Baptist church that's across the road, because actually I've got my community with me, and literally they're with me. We go together. So getting to the leaders, the leader of the council's office, I only got there because my church, St. Anthony's, was me. My schools was with me. Lister School was with me. It was all the different groups with me by that point, and actually organising meets people where they are.
Yeah, and takes them somewhere, takes them on that journey. I suppose I'm really thinking about this. This has been a very hard, difficult week, with so many things, like the report on COVID-19 and the impact of that on BAME people. Obviously, the killing of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. These things are desperately raw, and they've affected us very deeply. Do you feel like being an organizer gives you another perspective on those issues? Do you feel like actually in this week you want to be in that raw grief and then eventually move to organizing? Like, how does your experience of all that you've learned through organizing, how do you bring that to bear to a week like this week?
I guess there's a couple of different answers to that question. I guess there's like my kind of personal connection to the issue, and therefore the grief and emotion to it. I guess there's also, the kind of my professional mind that kicks into gear at this time. And I guess there's also about, then what I see outside of myself, it's really interesting because I think everything that we do comes from stories, and therefore I think it's very important for all of us to start with us and self, basically. And so I guess my reflection, I felt a little bit guilty. I felt a little bit guilty because I didn't lean into the moment of mourning and sadness. And I didn't lean in because my head is full of all the different injustices that are going on, and the work that we're doing to make steps to make changes really on these injustices. And there's so many, and I guess it was like this overload of like COVID is going on and seeing all the inequalities and stress and that mental eroding of people during this time, and then this extra thing that now comes up that is has a personal affinity and as a personal impact. And at first I was just like, oh, I can't really deal with this. So I felt that guilt, but I think in organizing, there's an appreciation for emotion. There's an appreciation for the journeys of emotions, and we talk in particular about kind of moving from a place of kind of rage or anger or hot anger, and moving, and that anger kind of cooling. And what happens when you act in those different types of emotions? What happens when you act out of rage, and what happens when you act out of sadness, and what happens when you act out of cold anger? And we feel like cold anger is the best place to act, when you've been able to sit and reflect and been frustrated by something and wanted to do something long term. And I guess it could take lots of different times for that to happen. It could take years and years and years for a hot anger to turn to cold anger. But for me, I guess because this journey has been so long in this particular issue, only after a couple of days, really, maybe 3 or 4 days, I started to think, actually, how do we make change? And so that anger, that cold anger, is like that righteous anger really was just like, we need to start organizing around this. I need to use this anger that I have. It's like this little burning anger inside to fuel the action that needs to happen. Because it's not going to be short term. It's going to be long term. And when you act on hot anger, you're really looking for the short term, quick change, which is not normally feasible. So I guess that was me really. And I've started to think about my narrative in this, and what's my story of self in this, and then starting to think a little bit about us. I think the story of what's happening here. How does this my story, my anger, affect us all? How do we all have a stake in that? And I guess organizing gives a space for us to start thinking about what is the collective narrative here, what is the collective interest here, that still is very much rooted in myself, in how important my story is and how I feel about this issue, because not everybody will be rooted in it the same way I am. And so that kind of collective self, organizing has a process for getting us there, for helping people to come to that place, a certain process for listening together, one-to-one, in small groups, across different organizations, across different institutions, to move us to a place where we're hearing those stories, we're hearing that anger, we're sharing that anger, and therefore we're coming to a place where we're collectively wanting action. So, seeing all the stuff on social media, like, you should want to do this, you should, that might work for somebody, and it definitely might not work for a lot of people. But in organizing, the way we get that collective narrative, that story of us, in this, is by that process of listening and I feel very privileged to have that kind of this craft and these universals that basically help us to think during these particular times.
Yeah.
And I guess this, you know, the next bit is really that kind of story of now, which is like, okay, so what do we do then? If we've got this common anger, this common interest to act, what do we actually do? How do we actually act?
Yeah.
And again, I feel very privileged that this craft has a very specific way of now how do we act? How do we act for change?
Yeah.
And so that gives me solace. A lot of people do not know how to now act for change. And that goes for that goes for Black people, that goes for white people, that goes for everybody. They have a different situation where it might be that actually I'm angry, I want to do something, but I don't know what to do and I don't know what's going to work. But actually organizing provides a craft, provides a strategy, it provides a history of winning and being effective. And that gives great solace. So yes, I guess overall for me and like my kind of my professional organizer role, I see this as an opportunity. I see it as a time where people are getting to do those three things. They're getting to think about how this affects them and their self, and they, I think people are looking at what does this mean for us, and people are thinking about what they can do now. And so as an organizer, it's like, goodness gracious me, I need to get out, let's do something. I need to harness this, because I know that in these moments of crisis, people slow down, they some of the blinkers are taken off, and they're focusing around these key issues and what can be done. And sometimes the excuses of life and kids and work and running around and hobbies and money and whatever it is that stops us from acting on the stuff that we really care about falls away just for a moment, and we can make some real progress. And so what next? We know we can do it. What next? Could they do something now? And so that's how we start to rebuild that fabric of relationship and of action. When people have these little tastes, they act, and they win. So yeah, I just think in this time, I'm really excited to see what opportunities there are to listen differently to people, open that conversation, and be really frank. What specifically when we're talking about this issue, be really frank about where are stereotypes and prejudices? Why do we have them? How do we want to challenge them? Having a safe space for people of color and white people to come together and share and talk about this in a safe space, and be listened to each other with the kind of precursor that we're looking to make change. We're looking for things to be different. And in that space, when you listen in this way, what opportunity for action comes out for it? And so that's my excitement. And I'm sure there's people in St. Mary's that are thinking a bit about their story of self and how this affects them, and how this affects us as St. Mary's or us as a community, and what they want to do now. And I'd love to be part of thinking about how we first have a conversation, first hear those stories, and then start thinking, what is the collective story for us? What is the collective interest in action? And then start thinking about what are those specific actions we can take.
And I think as members of Citizens, we're fortunate in that you have that craft, but you walk alongside us, and are here to support us in those things as well, aren't they? Holding that personal story, the grief that people are experiencing, but also saying, how can we act together for change? It would be really great, I think, if there were spaces that we could have for conversation, that you would join us for and help facilitate those conversations with us, and maybe see amongst us, what's emerging, what we want to take action on. So I think we'll talk perhaps over the coming weeks about setting up maybe a sort of online house meeting. We've had quite a few of them before in St Mary's, but we just find them really helpful as ways of sharing our stories and being with each other. So maybe you'd be happy to join us for those and help us listen together.
For sure I will. For sure I will. The challenge for St Mary's is to say, let's not leave anybody behind that wants to be in that conversation. How can we all be part of telling people, actually, we're talking about this, so make sure you're here to talk, and actually your story and your opinion and your thoughts and your vulnerability sometimes is going to be hugely important for all of us starting to think about how we do something about this. 100% will be there with you. And if there's anybody that wants to talk and have a one-to-one before that about particularly some of those things they're doing or what they would like to see, or what they're processing, I'd love to have a one-to-one with them about their, where we can act together and how we can build strong relationships around this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you let me know, I'd love to connect some of you with Paul. If you're watching this and you think I'd love to have a one-to-one with Paul, just get in touch with me and I'll gladly connect you. And Paul, we're just so thankful that you're our organizer. We're thankful that you're in Waltham Forest. We know we've got lots to learn from you, and we just feel really excited about the next season. So I know that we're praying for you. Our initial plan before we weren't allowed in church was that you would come to St Mary's on Mothering Sunday. That's what we were going to do, and we're going to introduce you, but we're doing it this way, and hopefully over time more and more people will get to meet you, and in time meet you in person. But until then, we're praying for you, we're thankful for you, and we're looking forward to working together in the future. Thank you so much, Paul.